There's the art that everybody knew, and then there was the art in the vault.
The vault obviously was a metaphor. He's like literally hiding his dark works inside of a vault.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the world of Thomas Kinkade.
There's such an amazing amount of archival footage. I almost wonder, despite the internet, if there would be as much archival footage today. Everything was shot, everything was followed, everything was on film.
You know, you actually are hearing at the beginning of the film the very first audio cassette tape that he recorded in 1974 at age 16. And when you listen to these tapes, he even says on one of them, you know, this is for the future art historians of the world, the assumption being that he's going to be great someday. So he was always recording. He had this like drive to make himself part of the cultural conversation, as one of our experts says in the film.
That is another great part about the film is that, like I said, you don't pass judgment, but it's not a hagiography. It's not, you're kind of just, you're removed from it, but then you present every angle of him, every side, and it's a very fair portrayal. He would probably say so too, had he been around to see it.
Yeah, thanks for saying that.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, that went to our intent in making the film, because Thomas Kinkade's fans have had one particular two-dimensional view of who he was, and his detractors have a completely different two-dimensional view of who he was. I said to the family, like, I know there's a 3D person in there somewhere, and that's what I want to find.
Yeah. Well, there's two sides of that. There's the art that everybody knew, and then there was the art in the vault, which is really the meat of the movie. It's really so fascinating.
Well, I mean, first of all, when we first reached out to the family, we didn't know that there was a vault of work that no one had seen.
Oh, okay.
Like, that was a documentarian's dream surprise. And that no one has seen that art until seeing the film.
And the vault obviously was a metaphor, and we had that figured out from the very beginning. He's like literally hiding his dark works inside of a vault.
But it is an actual bank vault that
It
he
is.
moved into his
Yes.
studio.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think he could have become as successful today as he was then?
For sure.
Do you think he would have become more successful?
He would have sank his teeth into social media like a wolf or something. Like, he really would have gone for it. He was always embracing new technologies, and he was kind of a marketing genius, as you can see in the film. He just was constantly coming up with ways to get his imagery as a painter out there, and also his image as a persona.
Did you ever get the feeling that the art he ended up becoming successful for was not really what he expected to do?
From the beginning, the idea of the film, like the sort of human idea of the film, was that denying yourself full self-expression will destroy you. But, he really did want to sell, Yeah.
Miranda actually early kind of in the editing process, I think, settled on this idea that he really had like two needs or two holes in his heart, if it were. He grew up in dire poverty, like not enough food to eat type poverty. And then he also grew up, as we learned in the audio tapes, with this ambition to be a great artist. And, his father was not around, and when he was around, he was problematic, and he clearly needed love in that way that sometimes being famous feels like it can give you. And so he had this desire to be famous and this desire to be wealthy.
Yeah, and he basically can track that down the entire trajectory of both his life and his career. All the decisions that he made boil down to those needs, and fighting with them. And in the film, we have that section where his wife and the then CEO at the time talk about why are we doing this? Can we just do a licensing business? And I think that Kinkade had created a gilded cage for himself, and he might have thought about it, but he just couldn't let go. He had hundreds of thousands of Americans who loved him. He's bringing in $120 million a year at the peak of the business. I think he just could not walk away. Yeah. So as I think of it, he just sort of flew too close to the sun and his wings melted.
Yeah. Where do you think the religious part of it came into it?
So he grew up in a religious household, and then by the time he's in college, he's a hippie, not going to church anymore, and he's got floppy hair, and he's kind of dressing like sort of slouchy. And one of the discoveries that we made was this mental breakdown that happens, I don't think was publicly known, but his college girlfriend talks about it in the film. And I think that he was so shaken by that, and he really needed something to like hold on to and pull himself back up out of that. And so, you see this really striking change in his appearance after he becomes born again.
He was called the painter of light. And the light in the windows, the kind of beatific light that comes in the sky and all that stuff, that was definitely something that was very deep, I think, and he carried it through so many of his paintings. His art is kind of the byproduct of the story, but the story of who Thomas Kinkade was really is the driving narrative and does take you from this cradle to early grave story.
I think the thing that makes the story so pertinent today is the way that he was constantly pushing to be connected to all of these American cultural and historical moments. That way that he imposed himself almost on cultural history just opened the door for us to be able to talk about all of these big questions. What is art and who gets to decide? And the politicization of taste. The cost of turning yourself into a brand, which I think is a really pertinent one today in our age of, social media.
Endless branding.
And endless branding, yeah.
As you went through everything, what else was a surprise?
Well, one thing we found out was that he was really serious about painting. And even as he became really successful commercially, he kept up on what was happening in contemporary art. He read all the magazines, all the journals. He was always surrounded by what the latest things that were happening, which was, I think, really surprising. And Susan Orlean, her experience of interviewing him back in 2000 was she expected him to be kind of a bumpkin, and it turned out he was this really sharp guy.
Yeah. When he came on the scene, there actually were people who were painting cottages on plates and doing scenes with snowmen and things like that, and they just were all terrible. They were terrible. And then he came on the scene and he just blew them out of the water because he was so incredibly skilled of a painter.
What do you hope audiences take away from this story?
I really want people to come out with a renewed understanding of how important it is to treat each other with nuance and compassion. I think that, in our there are many factors in our lives today, like political situation, social media landscape, and all that are encouraging us to dehumanize each other. And I think that it's really important to rehumanize each other, because that is the only way I think we can move forward as a society. So I hope that the film Art for Everybody is both an example of that and an experience of that.
Yeah, so important. Thank you for this great film, and check it out.
Thank you so much for coming over.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you, Gary.